All right. Okay, so what do we have on the docket today as far as the agenda goes, folks?
The last email from Commissioner Shea on the matter was chemical munitions and the impact report for that, crowd control, and revisit any notes or revisions from last Thursday's police commission meeting. That would be rifles, armored vehicles, and SIMs, the lesson tools.
Yeah. Lieutenant Turner, thanks for sending out those updated documents this afternoon. Didn't get a chance to read all of them, but I skimmed the first couple. I'll just have to be along for the ride on the review as we go, as time allows. Should we get started in that order, or would you prefer, is there something that feels more pressing?
No, I think that's, yeah, that order is fine. I know we do probably need to talk a little bit about some of the things that came up during the commission meeting. And we're fine doing that first, or the chemical agents, either one I think is acceptable.
Jennifer, do you have thoughts on which you'd rather get into first? Review the meeting notes, or chemical agents?
I think Joe's done the lion's share of all of the work since we last met. So whatever he thinks would be best.
All right. So, yeah, why don't we go ahead and then start with the chemical agents? I know that's something where we can probably get a fair amount of work done, and that is coming up on the Friday meeting, I think. So, whereas we don't have to necessarily revisit some of the things from this past Thursday's meeting until probably not this next meeting, but the meeting after that, depending on what the agenda looks like.
Okay.
Right.
Let's do it. Ideally, we will be able to have something to approve on the meeting on Friday. We'll see. Jennifer?
And then checking in, given that mix of stuff that we have on the agenda, do we need everyone in the room today?
Sorry. Are there people who don't need to be here is the question? I don't know. Who's doing chemical agents? Who's leading the
Yes.
review?
So yeah, I'll be doing that. The OPD folks are sort of free to, I know that they, especially Lieutenant Thomason and Lieutenant Doscuros, will have maybe some insight into these from their current jobs or previous jobs. So but they're free to log on or log off as they sort of see fit. They'll keep up, and I know they've got other things to do. So yeah, you guys are free to go if you need to. But yeah, if there's anything to add, I'm sure they'll chime in.
Okay, I'll leave that up to them then.
Right.
All right, if you want to screen share chemical agents, you can just get started.
Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone. Let me share my screen here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so this is a little bit clear. Let me know if that looks good. We can see the entire page there. Okay, great. So yeah, a little bit of background. This is a current training bulletin. So the department does have a current training bulletin. It's available on the commission's website, on the ad hoc page ad hoc website for this ad hoc, as well as the department's operations or our policy storehouse there. But in any event, it is from 2006. Likely needed some changes in any event, but talked a little bit about. So we can see the table of contents. I really haven't messed with that too much because it's going to have some changes and such. So those housekeeping things I usually save for the end. So just to kind of get started, and these are some of the things that you saw last week. I'll talk about those, and then I'll talk about a few things that I added today when I had a chance to get back on the policy. But I introduced or put in a purpose, which is again required. There's some things, overall description, contamination, delivery methods that are already in this policy. Then some of the things that the way that chemical agents are actually used, and these are relatively specific in this training bulletin. It does speak specifically about these. It talks about OC, so the duty OC, which is a standard issue item that is issued to every police officer in the police department. However, this training bulletin is the one that talks about it. So given that, I did keep some of that, the language in there. Yes, Commissioner Jackson Castaigne.
Sorry, just point of clarification for my own edification, and I think I might have missed this, and I'm still relatively new, but what is, does the bulletin carry the same weight as a policy? Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, great question. They are the same in terms of policy, in terms of whether we have to adhere to them. They are the same. The way that it seems like training bulletins typically worked, and this sort of format was created much, long ago, before any of us on this call were police officers, is that a training bulletin seemed like it got a lot more into the how to do certain things, but they kind of put in these training bulletins on some of this equipment and these techniques and said when to use them as well, and made it policy. So they are, training bulletins are policy, and actually it does say at the top of every training bulletin that they shall be used to advise of current police techniques and shall constitute official policy. So they do have the force of any other policy.
Great, thank you for that.
Absolutely. So this does talk about OC pepper spray, that again is standard issue. It talks about the CS gas, which is the chemical agent that's typically used, if we do use it at all, for crowd control, also used in tactical operations. The white smoke, which is not a chemical agent, however, that's often used, sometimes mistaken for a chemical agent, depending on how it's used in our operations. So those are the ones we use. There are other chemical agents that are available to law enforcement. The main one I can think of is one called CN. That is not one we use. That's known by the commercial application, which is chemical mace. So that is available to the general public in those small canisters. It is not pepper spray. It is a chemical, so is different than CS, and I'll talk a little bit about that if needed, but we do not use CN, we only use CS. So this training bulletin talks a little bit, and where you don't see any colors, this is existing language, talks about the duty aerosol, the operation of the duty aerosol, which is the OC or pepper spray that officers are issued. Changed a few words here, getting away from the word subject where I saw it. I'm sure there's some other areas. But then just out of an abundance of caution and keep things sort of uniform, I did add an authorized use and prohibited use section in here, as well as training. Now these are, again, this is a standard issue item, but there are some things that are instructive, and since this policy does cover this, I think it's useful to have it in there. So it talks about the authorized use, which is around in our use of force policy, and took some language directly from there. Some of the prohibited uses, these two are in our use of force policy about not using to arouse or awaken unconscious or sleeping people, or not using on passive resistors. And then this third one is something from the crowd control policy, which is that the duty pepper spray shall not be used for crowd dispersal. So indiscriminate use is banned. It may only be used against specific individuals for crowd control, and that is for serious unlawful conduct. There is training for this. It is in the basic academy, and then also in continued professional training. I did add a section today about training on chemical agents. So I noted that this policy, while it has a lot of information about how these things are deployed, it does not give too much about the actual training. So I spoke with our department's subject matter expert on this, and he told me that the training is, for the most part, in the tactical team school, so also known as the SWAT school. So that is the initial instruction. And that school does include and shall include training on the deployment, exposure, safe delivery, including in both crowd control and tactical operations, and then the legal rules and considerations for chemical munitions. So that training is required. The same thing for some members of the patrol rifle program. My understanding is that there are a small number of these people because the patrol rifle program is typically a sort of feeder program into the tactical team. So a small number of these folks are trained on this at some of these quarterly training days, and that's mainly to allow for them to use these if they are needed in what we call tango teams, which is teams of tactical team operators that sometimes deploy or are available to deploy these munitions during large scale crowd control operations or legal unrest or large scale criminal operations. There is staff training and keeping the records of both the items expended and the lesson plans and records. There is ongoing instruction, which is at least yearly for the tactical team, and I'm told they've had actually multiple trainings this year, and also for those members of the PRO program who are trained, cross-trained, they would need to be trained at least annually. And then all of our chemical agent trainers are required to be post-certified instructors on this topic. So one of the large things that I did do in this is struck mainly a lot of language around crowd control from this policy. And the reason being is that the crowd control training bulletin is the one that is going to control. It is the one that has the severely limiting AB 48 language, as well as language from our current injunctions and agreements with other parties. So this does say, instead of the previous language, says it may be used during limited crowd control situations, but is limited by law and policy. Now, all those, it does say all chemical munitions used during any of these crowd control situations be deployed solely by these tango teams, which are staffed by the trained personnel. So much of the this language here around unlawful assembly was likely moot because of the current law, and so that was struck. This one line here about the prohibition on duty aerosol use for crowd dispersal was moved up to the prohibited section that we saw earlier. And then this specifically calls out Training Bulletin 3G, which is our crowd control, and talks about the authorized uses and prohibited uses of chemical munitions, which are in that document. So as we see, the document does go, and again, all the black text is existing language, talks about how these are thrown, how, and gives some instruction and pretty detailed instruction on how these are delivered, and all of these items that are delivered and how they are used. If I keep going here, so tactical operations, you can see there is the redacted portion. I know we talked about last time, but these are, again, in sort of keeping with the very specific nature of this. There are extremely specific and sensitive tactical information about how these items are deployed by the tactical team. But we get into the way, so this is the way they are done, but the actual controlling language, the authorized uses and prohibited uses, I've added that in here. So for chemical agents for tactical operations, the authorized uses are listed here. It's that they shall be authorized by the incident commander at the rank of lieutenant above, unless there are exigent circumstances where the immediate use of the chemical agent would overcome life-threatening resistance or is necessary to stop a situation in which the officer reasonably believes that death or great bodily injury would occur to the officer or others unless the chemical agent is used immediately. And again, this is for tactical operations, it's not for crowd control. So incident commanders on the tactical operations may authorize these, the deployment of these for, and this is language that mirrors our armored vehicle policy. Incidents involving actual or threatened violence, or when reasonable suspicion based on articulable facts exists that violence will occur when attempting to take a person into custody using the tactical team, or when attempting to rescue others from a place where an engaged person is located. So those are typically the two main times when the tactical team will use these. The incident commanders on tactical operations may authorize the deployment of chemical munitions for incidents involving armed and unresponsive persons in vehicles. This is specifically references back to the training bulletin that talks about these type of munitions as a possible less lethal force option to avoid the use of lethal force in these type of situations. And then if the incident commander on specific criminal operations may authorize these when the operation allows for chemical agents or the operations plan. And then these may be used as an intermediate force option for, again, incidents involving actual or threatened violence, or when reasonable suspicion based on articulable facts exists that violence will occur using firearms explosives. So again, mirroring the language that we have in our armored vehicle policy. And then it specifically calls out that these chemical agents shall only again be deployed by these tactical team members who are trained in the specific munition or munitions to be deployed during tactical operations. There are some prohibited uses. They cannot be used without the deployment of the tactical team or a tango team, which is a subset of the tactical team, unless there are exigent circumstances. Again, it specifically calls out those where the immediate use would overcome life-threatening resistance or is necessary to stop a situation in which the officer reasonably believes that death or great bodily injury would occur to the officers or others unless the chemical agent is used immediately. Now, I don't expect that this would happen. These are not items that can be deployed to the field. Typically, they are not issued to patrol officers or anything like that. However, as mentioned, our tactical team members are part-time. So there may be times when they have these items, say, in their vehicle that they are going out into the field with or something like that. For instance, I could think of one who is a watch commander and might have these things in his vehicle at the time. So in these cases, I'm thinking very limited situations such as active shooter, something like that. Still, command authorization shall be sought from a command officer at the rank of lieutenant or above, unless that's not feasible. And then chemical munitions specifically shall not be used in the situations where persons who might be injured by the deployment are unable to escape the effects of the chemical agent are present. Specifically calls out elderly, physically disabled, or young children, unless there are articulable facts and circumstances that would reasonably demonstrate a need to use that chemical agent to resolve the situation, which outweigh the danger of the chemical agent use that might impact the member of these vulnerable populations. So this is an understanding that this is a factor that needs to be considered, and that is prohibited unless can be sort of specifically articulated as to why that would be necessary. So I added in, and just to be clear in here, that for instance, along with these precautions and these things that need to be considered, that an additional precaution has to be a review of the intelligence to determine whether or not unintended persons may be affected by the use of chemical agents. And again, we're talking about tactical operations. So I know Mr. Amaya talked about like multi-generational homes, other persons who share the structure like duplexes, triplexes, or apartment buildings, and then other persons in the area. So that this is a requirement for the incident commander that they shall consider these and the intelligence as to whether these persons are present. Now we understand there are ways to mitigate these. And so, for instance, evacuations or things like that. But this makes it clear to try and work on that balancing act of the importance of deploying these versus the importance of making sure that other people who are unintended are not affected by these when they are deployed. Let's see. So again, all the language in black is existing language. And then finally, I believe I did add on the back end here some post-deployment considerations. So already in this document was medical considerations. Expanded on that, saying that officers shall provide medical first aid and summon professional medical assistance whenever any person is contaminated by chemical munitions and taken into custody. That's required by our general use of force policy already. I know one thing that was mentioned the last time we talked is how do people whose home or business or something has been affected by this decontaminate the structure. So for instance, this policy is it is pretty detailed in the fact that it actually gives the steps on how to decontaminate an area, talks about marking the area, opening fans, even closing the doors and heating up the building as hot as possible, for instance. So it specifically says in here now that the incident commanders for any incident where chemical munitions are deployed inside of a structure shall both ensure that the property owner or the designee is provided with information for the Office of City Attorney's claim process, and then given the information on how to decontaminate their structure, which is already present in the document. Talk a little bit about evidence and used some of the same languages that we used in SIM for a collection of evidence, the equipment use reporting, which will be reported to special operations, documentation, the use of force requirement. So supervisors shall be summoned to the scene to conduct a force investigation whenever chemical agents are used, and then an inquiry and complaint process, which is required. That approved by Chief Tucker is one of the things that's going to be taken out of the document. So that's the extent of the changes, as you can see in the track to change mode. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, Ms. Tu.
Thanks. I've got a couple of background questions, and then I also see that Rachel Beck has questions in the Q&A. But hopefully the background questions will be helpful to all of us. These are super basic. For chemical munitions, should I be thinking of these as, outside of the duty OC, should I be thinking of these as tear gas and smoke grenades, or also flashbangs?
So tear gas, basically just tear gas. The smoke grenades can be used in sort of the same way and are typically used in the tactical sense, not as much for the same reason, which is denial of an area, but more so to like mass movement or something like that. The flashbangs do not have any chemical agent in them. We do have items called the CS blast, which do have both the flashbang action and the CS gas in them. Those would be controlled by both policies.
Got it. Okay, so that's why the flashbangs have their own policy.
Right.
Okay. And then what about how these are issued? You mentioned that sometimes you might have an officer who just happens to have them in their car. And I'm wondering, are these usually stored someplace? How do they enter? How do they leave storage, and how do they return or not return?
Yeah, so the tactical team leaders, I think, are the only ones who actually will have them issued to them. And that is because they have all their gear in their vehicles. They have issue vehicles because they need to respond and be the leader of the team. So there are, I believe, 5 sergeants of police who are tactical team leaders, and then I think 3 lieutenants who are team lieutenants. So they all have equipment in their vehicles that would be issued to them. In terms of everyone else, so all the other officers on the tactical team, for instance, they are not issued any of these. They are issued at the time of the event. So for instance, if there is a crowd control situation, or if there is a tactical operation, they're specifically issued. In crowd control, it gets even further, because when they do the issuance in crowd control, they keep an inventory list. During a tactical operation, there's the items that are on the equipment van that can be at the direction of a team leader or one of the team lieutenants, be given out to a tactical to operator to achieve a specific operation. So so either way, at the end of an event, there's an inventory taken. Each one of these is serialized, so they do have to be reported. And I think most of them, because they have certain amounts of like some explosive powder or something, they are required that we, when we use them, like especially the CS blast, I believe we have to report those to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. So there's a fair amount of reporting on these. In terms of sort of, just to get it back to the original question, yeah, the vast majority, besides the team leaders and the team lieutenants, are kept in a centralized location, which is under lock and key, and then only issued during operations.
And so it's not like you've got the equipment van stocked and ready to go that gets stocked once you have pre-planned an operation?
That one, I think I'd have to ask the tactical team. I think they have a limited amount in the equipment van, which is sort of ready. And then if there's going to be a larger operation, pre-planned operation, then they will send that out. So actually, I think what it sounds like is that actually all our chemical agents are required to be locked in the room, and then they bring them out specifically for the operation. Yeah, so nothing is pre-staged.
Other than the ones that the team leads might have in their cars.
That's right.
For just to get a sense of scale, is this like the entire trunk is full of tear gas, or is this like a handful? Like what? How much is just kind of wandering the streets of Oakland at any given time?
Oh, at any given time, maybe one or two CS blasts, right? And those are the team leaders are specifically going to keep those mainly for these situations that are extremely dire, but that we hope will never happen. Basically, like active shooter or something like that, where you know, similar to kind of the you know, we don't set up ad hoc SWAT teams, but we understand. So, for instance, the team leaders also keep their flashbangs on them for the same reason. Very rarely will they be used. And I can think of one time that I've read about in another police department where, you know, the officers were serving eviction. The person shot out of the door, shot an officer. That officer was down in the front of the home. They couldn't get to that person. They threw a flashbang and then at the same time ran out and pulled the officer out of the way. Something like that, of that sort of gravity is what they keep those for.
Okay, got it. And then my last like just background question. It sounds like everything is stored until there's a decision to deploy that the tactical team, and that might be pre-planned or it might be an evolving situation. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I did follow that correctly. I have more questions and comments about the policy itself, but I wanted to get some background questions out of the way. Commissioner Jordan, I don't know how you want to how or if you want to handle the Q&A.
Sorry, muted. Yeah, I mean, I can just read these, Rachel's comments here. Initially, she asked, using OC spray in response to assaultive resistance is self-explanatory. Can you explain why it's used on somebody who's running away? Parenthetically, that's what active resistance indicates, right? Which I don't think is totally correct, but I'll let Lieutenant Turner answer that. And then there's a second one, which I will read after that's been answered, if you like.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, that's not quite correct. Active resistance is a lot more than just running away. And yeah, I do invite people to visit our OPD publications page, where you can read the use of force policy, and that specifically defines some of these things like the levels of resistance and what these intermediate force options are. So force at all times is always governed by Graham versus Connor, and intermediate force options such as OC spray may be allowed to be used against something like active resistance. So the pepper spray is an intermediate force option. It is not just used for people who are running away, similar to that we cannot use the baton or the electronic control weapon solely because people are running away. There have to be other articulable facts and circumstances for the use of intermediate force. Those could be something like the severity of the crime. It's a lot different to a person who is accused of shoplifting, who is running away, versus someone who is suspected of murder, who is running away. And then it also some of the other differences may be the threat or potential threat that person poses. You know, a person who is extremely young or extremely old running away from a police officer versus someone who has threatened the police or said, if you touch me, I'm going to beat you up or something like that. There are different things. So it really does depend on the circumstance, but that is there are many considerations as to when the OC spray is used. I will tell you that that the Oakland Police Department, the number of times that we use the OC spray that is not on aggressive animals is probably less than 5 per year.
Thank you. Rachel's second question was, if a person is unresponsive, what threat do they pose?
Yeah, so again, this is armed and unresponsive, and I know I do invite the caller to go back and look at some of the archived material around armed and unresponsive persons. That when we did talk a lot about this when we were making the policy, it's training bulletin, I believe 3-P.03, I believe, also available on the department's policy website. Sorry, it is 3-P.01, armed unresponsive persons. And so this is a phenomenon that we do see a lot in Oakland, which is people who are armed, typically with firearms, but then are unresponsive. They are like passed out or asleep or something like that in a vehicle. We see this a fair amount, and the issue is not necessarily the threat that they pose because they are asleep, but it's the threat that they pose because they have a firearm, and that when they wake up and the officers are attempting to take them into custody, there is a specific threat around that.
Thanks. That's it for the questions. It sounds like Jennifer had a couple more questions.
I do. If anyone else has questions, definitely, jump in and cut me off, because I'll just keep going. We know me. Just first one comment is I really liked what you did with moving the crowd control stuff and just just taking those parts out and pointing the document towards the crowd control. That made it much easier to read, to have that taken out. One suggestion, which take it or leave it, is for the authorized use. I see the breakouts for authorized use for crowd control, and then a separate authorized use for tactical operations. And I'm wondering if, and I know under the tactical operations, you had that section saying anything that's not tactical or not authorized for tactical is prohibited. And I wonder if it would be worth it to make some section that makes that more explicit, of chemical agents not for crowd control and not for tactical operations. It's not permitted, or just something to make it clear what those areas are. And again, that's just a layout suggestion.
Okay, so just basically reiterate that the only two areas that they're authorized for is crowd control and then tactical, and then any other option are not authorized. Okay.
Yeah, if you go up to the very top to your index, I think that was
yeah, this one needs help right
yeah.
here.
Yeah, and so if there was so you've got 3 is crowd control, 4 is tactical operations. If you put in a 5 for any other use for chemical agents.
All right, understood.
This other one, so for the chemical agents for tactical operations, I was trying to read through the different kind of weapons that are available.
Mhm.
And I noticed that there's a lot of instructions about when something can or can't be used. Like some things you definitely don't want to do on rooftops because of the fire danger. And there's just a lot of very specific when you can and can't do things. And I'm sure the training includes what really drills that in, but I'm wondering if there are any other safeguards to make sure that the wrong items aren't deployed in the wrong situation.
Yeah, so in terms of the chemical agents that are used by the tactical team, I think the main safeguard is the training, and beyond that, then what it is that the department actually keeps. So my understanding is that the tactical team does split these type of things up. So for instance, they have the chemical agents that can be only used outside, are in specific spaces within their storage area. And then chemical agents that do not burn and thus have the possibility of being used inside are in a different area. So that there's sort of that safeguard. I don't know too much else. It's been a minute since I've been on the SWAT team. I remember that was one of the most important things, was about anything that was burning. And so there are things very similar to the sort of safety check that's utilized in when using SIM, right? Is that if a tactical team leader says to me, the tactical operator, okay, we need to use chemical agents in this building. It's been authorized by the incident commander. Then two of us might go back to the van. One of us would take the items out, look at them, verify, okay, this is not a bird. And then the other person would look at them and say, this is not an item that is going to cause a fire or something like that. So not necessarily written in this bulletin. I know because of a lot of the things that they do are not, and then some of the changes as these things come up, but I know that is something that's talked about in the training.
Yeah, that might be something to add to the impact report of if there has been any history of unintentionally setting a house on fire or something, and what the department actively does to prevent that situation. The I know I promised a bunch of questions. I've actually only got one more for this document, and that's around documentation.
Yeah.
I saw that section about needing documentation for use of force, but I'm wondering if that's going to be sufficient to support the department in the annual report that's going to have to come out about its use.
No, that will not. So we need the this part, the equipment use reporting. So the all of this has to be reported up to the supervisor, and then the supervisor is going to tell the commanders about that force. So we have a separate channel for reporting on for like our annual report or something like that. That's less about the why the use of force happened and the articulation, and more in an investigation, and more about just what occurred and the numbers that we were using or something like that. So yeah, just the use of force itself wouldn't support that, because it's designed to investigate the actual use of force and whether it was within policy or not.
Okay, and that's going to be sufficient for making its way to the military equipment use coordinator, right?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. And the SOD commander is the one that sets that, and they mainly are going to use the framework that's set up in K7 to support them on that.
Yeah. Okay. I would have to double check what the state law says, but just a quick note that you might have to also be able to give purpose for deployments. But again, I would have to double check the law on that one.
Yeah, I know there was something that we talked about.
Oh, here it is. Summary of how the equipment was used and the purpose of its use.
Yeah, so we do have that in our militarized equipment reporting structure. That's all in there. So Lieutenant Thompson created a template, and that's that we use that every time for these.
Okay, cool. That's it for me for this policy.
Okay, yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing on this one, and then let's see. So, there's probably some things that we could talk about in terms of the impact report for this one. So why don't I bring that up just quickly, even though I know most people have not had a chance to look at that since we just sent that out. So let me bring that one up here. Okay, yeah, so the impact reports. This is one that does list, it does have every item that the department currently owns. So I know there are some things that the department does not own. However, this list, which is pretty extensive, I think has every piece of chemical agent bearing items that the department currently owns. So that is these to include this, and some of them have somewhat unfortunate names, but riot control device, the triple chaser device, the triple phaser device, this handball device, which is burning CS, the CS Blast, which is the one that is both a loud report, a light, and then also CS. There's the tear ball CS, the Stinger, which was discussed in the SIM and which is controlled as well by SIM because it does have these rubber pellets that come out. The flameless tri-chamber device, a baffled device with which allows for interior use, a pocket tactical device, scat shells, which are now getting into 40 millimeter launched devices, which are for outdoor use, the muzzle blast, which we have and we own, but we do not use. So I'm not exactly sure what the process is for eliminating these from our inventory, but the subject matter experts tell me that we do not use these. The 40 millimeter ferret round device, which goes through slight barriers like windows. And that is the extent of these. So some, just in terms of the impact report, some issues that I've noted, initial costs. We do not have this information. However, from what I've looked at in terms of where I can find this available online, it does seem that each unit is about $30 to $55 per unit. But I don't have information on how much it actually cost when we purchased these, at what times. And I do not have any information about that. So there is estimated or anticipated costs, both the cost per unit, which is a replacement cost, and then where that a person could be impacted by the unit or by the agent. There are costs such as first aid, perhaps more in-depth medical treatment, and then, of course, even justified uses of force involving chemical agents may result in costly litigation or other costs. We do talk and continue to talk about some of the possible negative impacts, including respiratory effects, that should be E, hospitalization or exacerbation of existing respiratory illnesses, emotional trauma to vulnerable or minor bystanders, and potential litigation costs. There are possibly ongoing costs, but the department does anticipate that these will be minimal, mainly because the way that we have changed the way we police crowds, and that for the most part, our tactical operations team is very successful on most of its de-escalation strategies and does not have to use chemical agents in the vast majority of its deployments. Most times our deployments are resolved by a peaceful surrender without the use of force. However, there are the replacement of any munitions expended and then ongoing training costs that are built into the larger tactical team school, and then the ongoing tactical team and patrol rifle officer training. Again, like every other impact report, it does talk about some reasonably anticipated impacts, including deliberate misuse, unintentional misuse, and the perception of militarization or exacerbation of a police community divide. There is an impact or an anticipated impact around possible litigation surrounding these. So understanding that we have been sued, that both the city and the department, but one of the mitigations for that is the department has engaged with our plaintiffs' attorneys from previous actions, as well as the Oakland City Attorney's Office, to codify the changes in both in crowd control law, as well as injunctions against the city, which limit the use of chemical munitions used during crowd control to only the most severe situations. So understanding that is a possibility. Mitigations, again, do have some of the mitigations that are inherent in many of our policies. DGOK3, our use of force policy, which always controls no matter what when we are using force, is always the baseline. The force reporting and review, complaints and investigations, community outreach and specific inquiries, and then this oversight that we're doing. So when we talk into some of the things that specifically discussed, technical safeguards, so we do only use the CS as opposed to the less common chemical agent CN. CS does typically produce mild to moderate effects, and it can be more easily decontaminated versus CN, chemical mace. If anyone has ever been sprayed with chemical mace, it is an extremely unpleasant situation. I don't recommend being sprayed with pepper spray or CN either, but I have been exposed to both of those and they do contaminate. Whereas I am told, I've thankfully never been exposed to chemical mace, but I'm told it is much worse. So the department does not use those. Our procedural safeguards. So we do talk about severely limiting these chemical agents during crowd control, requiring the approval from a command officer to use these chemical agents during tactical operations and for limited purposes involving violence or the threat of weapons, limiting officers who use those only to specialized or specially trained tactical team and patrol rifle officers, and then keeping the inventory of chemical agents brought to the field, even if they are not used during crowd control, to ensure specific munition accountability. So each item that goes out into the field during crowd control situations must be checked back in at the end of the night. So there are none that are sort of hanging around or have been lost or have been, God forbid, misused. We do talk a little bit about de-escalation and some of the mitigating aspects. We do, and the department does, use the multiple other de-escalation methods during crowd control prior to the use of chemical agents. These are required by our policy. They do include things like announcements, warnings, metering out of crowds, use of a larger amount of police officers to control specific riotous behavior, and then arrests if necessary before it gets to the level of chemical agents, and then only if allowed by law and policy, which basically requires extremely severe and close to life-threatening, if not life-threatening, force or resistance. Chemical agents used during the tactical team operation is limited to the tactical team. It does have the command officer approval, but before these agents are considered as force options, the tactical team does utilize the principles of de-escalation, mainly through surrounding announcements and negotiations. And as I said, in the vast majority of our deployments, these are successful in inducing a peaceful resolution. There is no third-party dependence, and these are used throughout the city and throughout our jurisdiction, depending on the circumstances. Track record. I know that this could be an entire dissertation probably on track record. But I think it's probably best to just be frank. There is a long and frankly less than stellar reputation in American policing around chemical agents. They were frequently used in crowd control. As a track record of indiscriminate use of chemical agents during these type of incidents in American policing. There have been negative consequences due to the use of chemical munitions during crowd control, including serious injuries. And then I speak specifically about the city of Oakland, and that we have been the targets of litigation several times due to crowd control techniques that were used in the past, and that was as recently as 2020. These controversies did surround the use, and I think one of the nice things about the track record in this case is there is a significant record surrounding discussion, debate very recently. September of 2021, the state of California passed legislation limiting the use of these chemical agents, and our policy specifically does follow that legislation. So understanding that the track record has been debated by the people of the state of California as recently as September of 2021 does allow, I think, for this section to be a little shorter, because we understand that the track record has been debated. The legislature has provided for laws around this that are very strict and that limit the use of chemical agents during crowd control to only these circumstances. I'm happy to take any questions.
I can start it unless anyone else wants to start us off.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. Cool. So I haven't had a chance to read this ahead, so I'm really glad you took us through today. At the very beginning, there was a initial cost section. And I thought that was very helpful context to know, like, we just don't know what the initial costs are.
Yeah,
I'm wondering, if you could at least include some just a reminder of like how many total units are. Like, I'm just gonna use an even number. If there were 100 units, and then, that means that it's possible that it costs between, $3,000 to $5,500 dollars for everything. And you know, you can make that as, open as you need to, just to give people a sense for scale. For the impact section, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to make a note of getting a little bit more specific about ongoing or past litigation. Obviously not details about ongoing litigation, but just giving a sense for how much litigation has occurred in the past. I liked how you pointed out that we have made changes based off of the previous settlements that hopefully will mean fewer lawsuits in the future. But maybe adding something about that. I've got two more suggestions for the, two and a half, I guess, suggestions for the impact. One is, we had talked earlier when we were going through the policy about how there's all of these different kinds and there's procedural safeguards to make it so that you are less likely to accidentally set someone's house on fire. And so maybe calling that out as a possible unintentional, you know, somehow 3 people grabbed the wrong thing and set a house on fire. That could be a potential impact. And that's also something that you could add into the section about procedural safeguards. And then this one, I'm not sure if it goes under impacts or if it goes under track record. I know that in the past, one of the things that can happen is when a person is shot with a tear gas canister, like it's launched at their body. That's a very real situation that has happened across the US, including in California. And it might be worth adding that either under impacts or that later section of exactly what extent those injuries were, since some of them are pretty significant. Like there was a man in Northern California who had one launched at his face, and
yeah, that can lead to death. So I think we say that in the policy. So yeah. With that, yeah, because it specifically talks about that. I know, because I remember reading that in our policy earlier today. But
yeah, that particular case, the man survived, but the injuries described were pretty serious. Let's see, I'll let you type and then I'll give that last one. And of course, there's also the people who've lost eyesight from that as well. Last one is going to Mr. Ramaya's point about property. And so hopefully he can speak a little bit more about this. There's it's good that we're starting to think about that and offering pointers to here's who to reach out to, and here's some general decon steps for your home. But I'm wondering if potential impacts could include making housing inhospitable, if that could have a impact on the people who live there, if that could impact children being able to, either their health or their education. Yeah, and I'm also wondering how quickly getting any kind of relief from the city attorney's office could move. And so if chemical munitions are fired into someone's house, could that lead to an extended housing issue for the residents there? And again, this might be something that that Mr. Amaya can speak to a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we're pretty aware of the possible consequences and sort of downstream. I think that that's a little bit beyond probably where in terms of downstream consequences, because like those are the type of consequences that can occur, and we can say, okay, what is the cause of that? Is the cause the use of the this particular munition, or is the cause the resistance posed by the person, right, or something like that? So understanding, right, and then also speaking about the length of time that the city attorney takes is really, yeah, definitely not something the department is going to be has any ability to do sort of anything about as the office of an elected official. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, definitely don't want to set up the department to stir things up with another part of the city. It is still something that could be impactful if a family is displaced for some time because of this. But I see Erickson is unmuted, so maybe he can jump in.
Yes, and thank you. And I do understand where the limitation of the department comes, and what I'm also curious, if there's less deployment, can we get like a map that shows where this is being deployed, given that unlike the Bearcat is probably mobile and you might have to cover more ground, and this is just a more of a stationary use. And just wanted to see, like, yeah, the deployment, if it could, and its impact statement at the end of the year, can we see like how many times and visually for people to see where it is actually being deployed?
Yeah, so I'm gonna sort of echo Commissioner Jackson Castaigne's point, especially if we've got a low sample size, which I believe it is. So it's likely not going to say exactly where, to avoid re-traumatizing those people or stigmatizing them.
Right.
But yes, in the annual report, yeah, I think we can say, how many times it's been used, what police areas, something like that. And also differentiate between crowd control, which are likely, I mean, we all kind of know where that's going to be, right, somewhere around 14th and Broadway, and then tactical operations. So I'm not sure if that's information we have. I will check in with our special operations division, which I think is on the line, and they can maybe do some research into that, and then see if that's the information we have, at least for maybe the current year, if there are any deployments so far.
I think we're good to keep moving unless anyone else has questions.
All right, so I'm gonna I got a few notes there on that one, and yeah, I appreciate everyone kind of doing that one on the fly, while we understanding that we just got that a few hours ago, so I appreciate everyone's understanding here. Let's see. So of the ones that we sent out and talked about last week on Thursday. So first of all, I guess just the assistant chief is not here. He apologizes in advance that he was unable to attend tonight. He is on a scheduled, well-needed vacation. I think he's he's not here. Yeah, I think that it was a good opportunity for everyone to kind of speak their piece and talk a little bit about these different things. I know we did get the opportunity to talk about several of the items. And we did get a major hurdle done, which is K7, the overarching policy, which brings the department very, very close to at least Assembly Bill 481 compliance, about talking about how it is that we need to acquire these items, how we need to report on them, things like that. But as we sort of talk a little bit, so maybe if we could talk about the just kind of take it in order. So if we talk about the department rifles, is that something that we can discuss a little bit?
Sounds good.
All right, great. So let me start out with
Sorry.
yeah.
Just quick check-in. Did you want to do crowd control first or jump into these first? I'm good with either, but didn't
Okay.
want that to
Yeah,
get
let me
lost.
see. I don't know what let's see, Lieutenant Thompson, do you want to talk about crowd control first, or would you rather me talk about the stuff from last meeting?
It's up to you guys. It's up to the group. I can fire up. I have it on my computer. I can bring up the policy if we want to go over specific parts of it. I'm fine with it. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, why don't we, as we're kind of, Lieutenant Thompson's moving back to his computer, we'll talk about, I know we've had the opportunity to talk a little bit about crowd control and some of the things that we've seen in there. So are there folks because I know we got the opportunity to hear from Lieutenant Thomason and sort of overall many of the changes that he made, especially with the Office of City Attorney and the adherence to Assembly Bill 48, adherence to many of our the injunctions and other legal controls that do constrain the city of Oakland. Are there any questions about the crowd control policy? So beyond some of the things that we can't really touch, which is much of that injunction language and things like that that are from various cases, there are some things in there that at least can inform our work here, which is helmets, which are definitely a controlled item under the city's ordinance. The controls that the policy talks about in terms of use of chemical agents during crowd control, and then the controls that the crowd control policy talks about in terms of the use of SIM, specialty impact munitions. So 3 items: the helmets, the chemical agents during crowd control, and the SIM during crowd control. So does anyone have any questions, at least for Lieutenant Thompson, on the overall crowd control policy at all?
I actually just had one thing I was curious about, which is last time we talked about it, Chief Allison had said that we could probably add a restriction on using the LRAD's warning tone in crowd control situations. So I was interested in seeing how the language for that came out.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I did not add it right now, but I will. Let me talk to if DQ's on the line. If he doesn't have a problem with me adding it, then I don't know what his policy is gonna say.
So I think what Chief Allison said was that we had never used it for crowd control policy before in the past. And it wasn't that we were going to add it to say that we're never going to use it, but I think we're going to explore that option, if I'm correct or no.
I could check the recording, but I recall him being pretty open to adding it into the policy.
I can look into it. I think one of the things we had discussed, sorry, I'm trying to look at the camera and look at everybody here. It's confusing. Froze up, so sorry about that. Can you hear me? Although I lost my camera angle, but that's fine. I'll put the camera back on. I think one of the things that we had discussed was whether or not it was on one of the reasons that we can actually utilize the LRAD, and it was for crowd control. But taking it away from the crowd control policy, it's something we can kind of discuss on here. I would not want to take it away. I would want to have the option to utilize it as long as we're following the policy for the warning tones. If it's something that comes to the very end of saying, hey, we can't use the LRAD at all unless we take away the warning tone for the crowd control policy, then obviously that's something that I don't want to, I don't want to lose the LRAD just because we can't use the warning tone for crowd control. Does that make sense?
So my question, I guess, would be like, so our policy around the LRAD and the warning tone is that we're limiting the amount of the duration and the amount of times it's used, right? Or something to that effect. I know it's been a minute since we talked about that. And is there a way that we can use those same sort of controls within, or reiterate those controls within the crowd control policy, or to say to refer to that? Because I do agree that, especially since our crowd control policy and the state law does require that we really try and get people's attention and let people know, especially like if we are on the cusp of using chemical agents. I would hate for someone to say, I wasn't able to hear, I didn't hear, I wasn't really alerted that something bad was about to happen because the department didn't use every option for announcing, including a use of the warning tone before utilizing chemical agents. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why we probably want to keep that, but it's still subjected to the same controls that we have. So maybe we could table that, look at, sort of crosswalk those two between the crowd control policy and the warning tone in the LRAD, and then bring that one and send that maybe by email.
Yeah, email sounds good. And that was the only thing I wanted to check in on for the crowd control review for today. I don't know if anyone else had anything they wanted to dig into, or if we should go to the rifles and sims and armored vehicles.
And then just back on the warning tone, Jennifer, I'll bring that up with the assistant chief when he comes back from vacation too. So we're definitely all on the same page. So if he definitely said that, then I will be adding it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it also just as Lieutenant Turner says, it just makes sense that if we've already have a policy that sort of dictates how the warning tone is used for the LRAD, it should just be sort of reiterated within this so that it's clear. Maybe it's redundant, but redundancy is rarely hurt anyone in the policy world. It's sometimes these things need to be sort of duplicated. And Jennifer, do you feel like that's sufficient?
I think my greatest concern is over continuous use of the warning tone in crowd control situations. And so that's the I believe that was what we were discussing with Chief Allison, though I'd have to go back and check.
Yeah.
So that's my main concern.
Yeah, my takeaway was similarly that it was about how long and how sort of and what the interval between usage and that kind of thing was really what potentially made it problematic. And wherever we settle on the sort of LRAD policy itself should be sort of mirrored in this policy. That just makes sense. So if we can live with one, we should be able to live with the other. Having said that, I'm happy to move on to review of the policies from the meeting last week.
Yeah. Quick logistics note. I know that we were supposed to do LRAD in 2 days on Wednesday. Does that sound good for the department timing wise to get this answered? I forget when the chief gets back.
Yeah, I'm fine with Wednesday. I think one of the biggest hurdles I'm having is talking to the representative from LRAD, getting a response back. So it's been a lot of digging, a lot of research, a lot of outside agency policies, which is totally fine. But now it's getting to the nitty-gritty of not everybody's really defining continuous warning tones or alert notifications, however you want to use the terminology. And it's getting to the point of, I know I put a lot in the policy, and I'm kind of getting, I think this ad hoc committee has helped gratefully of just trying to define what we think should be the continuous and the non-continuous. So I'm totally fine with it, but I think it's come to the point where it's just kind of going through the policies and going through the policies, and it's kind of everybody's just saying, hey, it's between 2 and 5 seconds. I think it's up to us if we want to go more into it, trying to figure out, I understand like in between each cycle, are we waiting a second? Are we waiting 2 seconds? It doesn't define that in outside agency, so that's something we can totally discuss. And then the decibel rating was what I just researched and I found on a PDF, which was really interesting to show how it goes down 6 decibels and it goes down 12 decibels, which was really interesting. But I'm totally fine for Wednesday. I mean, I can do a little bit more research and I can try to find more, but I think it's getting to the point where it's pretty much, that's the main stuff I found. So, I'm reading some of your emails, but I think that's what I found. I think it's just what we want to come up with if we say, hey, we wait a second between each tone. So it's, that's defines continuous versus non-continuous after the 5-second mark. I think that's what one of the questions maybe you're asking, Jennifer, initially.
Yeah. I'm excited to dig in on Wednesday. You're from the last draft. You've done a lot to tighten it up, so pretty excited to see where it is.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, so why don't we do this? I know we had I hope people had the opportunity to take a look at some of the changes I made to the rifle impact report. We can talk about those, but I think it might be instructive just because I think we do have Lieutenant Toribio now on, and appreciate you being here, Steve. So if there, I know there was a question and some conversation around the authorized uses for the rifles at the police commission meeting, and I know that typically the good time or place to suss those things out and kind of talk about some competing views, and a person who's good at that, probably from this courtroom experience, is assessing those, getting us to sort of say both sides, is Commissioner Shea. But yeah, I think there are some questions around the department's authorized use. So first of all, why don't I bring this up so we can kind of see what we're talking about here, and then second, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. So I'm bringing the document up here. Okay. And so again, we talk about authorized deployment. I'm going to take out that little margin there so it can be seen, which is section 9 of the policy. So I do recall, Jennifer, that you had a little bit about this and wanted to talk about this a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind kind of just sharing your thoughts, I'd appreciate it.
Give me one moment to find my notes, because I do remember sending you some thoughts and I cannot find that on my computer.
Yeah, so I kind of, while you're looking for that, I want to maybe contrast a bit between policies. So understanding that the Oakland Police Department does limit the number of people who are issued these rifles, and that we do have an authorized uses that, especially when you compare to some of our other controlled equipment use policies, is not necessarily as strict or as specific. When we talk about like chemical agents or armor vehicles or something like that, it is a lot less, or those policies have very specific controls about when it is that that these items can be deployed and when they can't. And I think that the authorized use around patrol rifles is that these situations are so different, and we see so many things where the officers may need these, and B, that it is kind of an extension of a firearm, understanding that there is a perception, possible wound ballistics, and things of that nature around these items. But at the same time, they are firearms. Every one of our officers is issued a firearm. And we do control lethal force in the same way. So I did get a chance to look a little bit at some other policies, and I was kind of thrown off when I saw that Berkeley's policy, the city of Berkeley, around deployment of rifles has one line that says, in light of known or potential risks, a tactical rifle officer should deploy the firearm which best meets the needs of the police response and in which he or she has the greatest accuracy and operational confidence. Which I found was probably a little bit too lax or too sort of broad, but does kind of create a contrast between some of the another police department in a similar situation, which is Berkeley, which has a extremely similar law and our policy. So the department, at least the absent sort of some compelling arguments, is likely going to argue that we keep what is already written around our authorized deployment. But with that said, I definitely, this process has been great in terms of challenging some of the native assumptions and really getting there. So I do want to give voice to that.
Joe, oh, sorry, Erickson, go ahead.
I was wondering, in the deployment of the assault rifles, I've seen like previous numbers of that per quarter. It's always like around 200 deployments. From those deployments, is there like a number of how many times it became lethal, like to the body and damage of the person, and just being detailed to the point of like where there are children present and all that. So I'm wondering, because per quarter, that's, and like around 200, that's a lot. So I'm just wondering, yeah, the outcomes of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did get a chance to look, and thank you to Lieutenant Trivio, who gave me the 2022 deployment numbers, and they're actually in the most current draft of the impact report. So currently in Oakland in 2022, our patrol rifle officers have had 129 deployments. That may include multiple officers at the same scene. So each officer reports their deployments, and then they're all put into a spreadsheet. So, and I know when I saw the spreadsheet from Lieutenant Toribio, that there were several incidents where multiple officers, and so each of those count as a deployment. So that's likely less than 129 total incidents. We have this year not had any of those deployments that have been lethal. And from my research, I found since 2017, we have had at least four incidents, lethal force incidents, specifically involving rifles. So there was, in 2017, there was one person who was firing at community members and officers. That person did have a rifle. So one of our tactical team officers with a sniper rifle shot and killed that person. In 2018, there was a person who was reported to be armed with a firearm that was asleep between two buildings, and 4 officers, all armed with rifles, shot and killed that person. There was in 2020, one person was in the midst of an armed robbery caravan and ran over and severely injured a police officer and almost ran over a community member. That person, one officer with a rifle, shot and killed that person. And then in 2021 has been the last time that we have had a lethal force incident. The officer shot a person while they were attempting to serve an arrest warrant, and that person did survive. So we've had 4. So if we do kind of assume, and I think it seems like a little less. So those 2022 numbers are current. So we're in September now. So that's about 129 deployments from our patrol rifle officers. So we're looking at maybe 300. Maybe we'll hit 300, probably more around 250 deployments for the year, and no lethal force incidents. So likely around, if we're looking at averages, a little less than 1 of these per year would be average to turn into lethal force.
Thank you.
All right, I checked my notes, and I only see the ones that we went over last Wednesday. Was there another set that you were thinking of? I know I also sent notes about the less lethals.
No, I think this was specifically when we were discussing it on Thursday around the authorized uses in this policy. Yeah, we had the chance to discuss a little bit with in front of the commission about authorized use and
Thank you, thank you. I'm caught up now.
so yeah, I know that there's you know, and this ad hoc does not have to be a unanimous you know, body, and there can be disagreements, but you know, as much as possible, we at least like to hear out, you know, or address any concerns, or at the very least to you know, respectfully disagree.
Yeah, thanks. So kind of the same as what I've said before of I think that we do have an opportunity to dig into the authorized use section here and get a little bit more specific about when use is authorized and when use is prohibited. My big concern is that the authorized use right now starts at an officer being able to articulate an objectively reasonable explanation for why there should be a deployment. And given the lethality of this and the fact that lives are on the line, I'm wondering how much room there could be to go beyond that and to look into why an assault rifle is being deployed and what the department can do to explore that question a little bit more and find ways to limit the killing of people in Oakland.
So I do see Lieutenant Toribio's hand up. I'll go to him in just a second. Do want to just push back a little bit on, you know, on some of the things. I know that that these items are for many reasons controversial, right? Assault, you know, even the terms assault rifle is one that is a loaded term, and understand that if I had my druthers, right, everyone, including me, would forget that these ever existed. We would go in a world where they do not exist. Unfortunately, that is not the case. But I think that sometimes the language that we do use around these, and especially some of the assumptions, right, around lethality and things like that, because the vast majority, at least, of our lethal force incidents at the police department are with duty handguns, and that every officer does carry a duty handgun, and that we have seen that the majority of these the times when we deploy these incidents, that they do not result in lethal force. But that being said, I know Lieutenant Toribio has thought about this a lot, and I do want to give him the opportunity to talk a little bit as well.
All right, hi, good afternoon, guys. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me first of all. I have a little bit of a different setup. Okay, perfect. So I do think it's important to understand that deployment and firing are a couple different things. So when I think about deploying a rifle, what I think about is an officer is seeing a situation where this may be the most ideal tool that may be needed to resolve an incident due to a potentially dangerous subject. And that doesn't necessarily mean that because I'm deploying it, I have to be firing it. So I think that's one distinction to be made. Remember also that case 6 is a policy specifically for this piece of equipment, but it all still falls under Department General Order K3, which is our use of force policy. So the criteria for deploying a rifle does not mean that the criteria is met to be firing the rifle. And so the way I think it's can help if we look at it is there's criteria here. There's a kind of, I'm using some objective reasoning in the field to understand that I have this tool that may help me resolve this incident. Now, because I have this tool deployed, doesn't mean I have to use this tool to resolve the incident. You know, it's because I have this rifle now, I have to use this rifle because I deployed it, so I'm going to use it. We also teach in training too that the overarching thing is that this should give us a tactical advantage. And if it doesn't, we're not going to use it. So we even put people through shoot scenarios where they're not even using the rifle, they're transitioning to their pistol due to space, due to maneuverability, due to environment in terrain where getting the rifle in an optimal position is not gonna be sufficient to accomplishing the need to resolve the threat. So I think that if we look at things through kind of more of that lens and really disassociate the deployment of a rifle from its actual firing, I think it can help contextualize what we're looking at with this general order here. And I hope I explained things okay there.
If I can interject, so I do think that, you know, oftentimes in reading these policies, objectively reasonable is the standard. It's, you know, it is the legal standard. We see it over and over and over again. And I know that from the department's perspective, trying to add greater specificity in like laying out specific scenarios or instances in which a piece of equipment can be used, there is a fear of sort of causing individual officers to have sort of a lockup for fear of not understanding the policy, it being too specific to cover the instance that they are utilizing a piece of equipment, or whatever the circumstances might be. But I do think that we've had some pretty good luck of strengthening the language from objectively reasonable. I am interested in hearing if Jennifer has, if she has thoughts about what that kind of specificity looks like, so that we could maybe try and find a middle ground, because I do understand that is sort of where the department and most departments are coming from, and maybe we can get a sense of what you'd like to see, and we can try and find a compromise, or at least get a sense, maybe try and get on the same page. But looks like Erickson also has a thought, so let him.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I hear the training, I definitely hear the conscious decision that is coming from folks, and also like the amount of dedicated personnel, right, for using this equipment. I think for me, what it comes down to is definitely like you could have all of that, but these decisions are made in a split second, and sometimes they're like, let's be honest, there are mistakes that are made, and what we're trying to get to is like, and if the safeguards are the training, do we need to make more changes to that, but I think for me is just like, how can we prevent any injuries when it comes to that split second of thinking, right? Right, because you could be the best at what you could be, but there's always that possibility of doing a mistake, and yeah, I'm just wondering if there's like any opportunity to visit maybe the training, or even adding some language of when it comes to like making the decision announcements, or yeah, I'm not sure, but I think for me is really that split second decision, and really just seeing like, where's the accountability right there, and how can we determine that,
Thanks. It looks like Officer Toribio also has a thought.
Yeah, thank you, sir, on that. It's very actually comforting to hear somebody mention the need for training. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we have done in recent years is we actually have expanded training for the patrol rifle school. We've doubled the length of it, and we've also included 2 additional training days per year to cover things that aren't even that don't even have anything to do with marksmanship. We cover field deployments, and we cover dedicated arrest teams, and we cover working with armored vehicles. So on those specific training days, it's all about the thought process and critical incident resolution and employing our principles of de-escalation to peacefully resolve incidents. So I thank you. I totally appreciate that sentiment and you bringing it up about the need for training. Mistakes, I mean, there's no accounting for them. I mean, just by virtue of people being people. So what do? We do what we're doing here. We try to draft policy, and we try to train our officers to this policy and to this law, and equip them as best that we can, so that they make sound decisions under stress. You know, I think we're doing a good job. Can things be better? 100%. And that's why we're always constantly evolving our training and constantly doing things like revising policy here.
Go ahead, Lieutenant Turner.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think, Mr. Mai, you really got onto a good point about, decisions being made in a split second, and what that means and how we can control for these. And you're right, when we're talking about lethal force decisions, right, those are ones where we really want to try as much as possible on the front end to work and make things better, put the officers in a better position, put the department into a better position, so that way we limit the amount of split-second decisions people have to make. And when they do have to make them, we put them in the best position to succeed, right? And success being hopefully that we always follow our core principles, right, around sanctity of life and things like that. So when we apply that to this sort of thing, and I go back to this idea of limiting when we're talking about, we're making more specific when we deploy these rifles, as opposed to using them. So using them, I think, is the split second. When we deploy is kind of the portion leading up to that, when we can maybe make things better. I think one of the ways the department and the reason why that we allow this, we have this language like this, and it is rather broad, is precisely because we have the level of training that you heard Lieutenant Toribio talk about. I feel confident that the reason that we have a lower incidence of lethal force use by our police officers is because we have these trained officers in the field that are acting as the primary cover. They are acting as the primary lethal cover, and they are the ones making the decision, as opposed to, as we've seen in other agencies, a bunch of officers all with their handguns out, and then suddenly it becomes a situation where everyone is firing. That the specific reason we use these rifles, and we allow these trained people to use, and I'll use a word that I know is kind of a dirty word, and I tell people to avoid this word a lot, but I'm gonna use it anyway. We allow them to use their discretion. There are many ways in which the department tries to limit the discretion of officers. In this case, I believe this is one that the department is very set on keeping this discretion for this limited cadre. I'm looking at the weekly gunfire summary. I'm looking at the amount of rounds that we're seeing on the shot spotter. I'm looking at the number of homicides. I'm looking at the number of deployments of these rifles and the circumstances of these, and how rarely this turns into lethal force. When making split-second decisions, these are the ones I want these officers to be the ones making those, because I know the level of training that they get. And so that is why we allow this type of discretion on the front end.
Yeah, I think if it's not mentioned, it would be helpful to mention that exactly what you said, that they are dedicated people, right? Because I think it also shows a model to other police departments that rely on people that probably are not educated to or even trained in reacting to those split-second decisions, right? So I'll just emphasize that really is that there are specific dedications, and if those folks that are dedicated to that, if they have like background checks, if they have like clean records, and do not show like aggravated intent to anybody, I think that's important to know.
So I'd also like to say that sort of on the same topic, of those four lethal shootings Lieutenant Turner described previously, at least two policies that I've worked on myself have been, I mean, if not spurred by those events, it had a lot to do with those events. And because of that, I've seen the videos of those events. I've watched them, I don't know, 50 times each, over and over and over again, all body cam footage available. And the policies that were drafted specifically around arrest teams, specifically around armed and unresponsive, some stuff around Bearcat, had everything to do with making sure that those things didn't happen. If the policies that exist now and the training that exists now existed when those things happened, I think it's likely that those things probably would have been avoided. Not to say, it's hindsight and all of that, right? But that there is progress. Some of it may be incremental progress. It always is, right? But I think that there is a very sort of proactive effort being made by police commissioners as well as members of the department to avoid those specific things. And so I tend to sort of believe that we were moving in the right direction, and I'd like to see a consensus, or at least a sort of if not a perfect consensus, at least some sort of medium happy compromise around this language so that we can move forward, because I know we have a deadline. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thanks. And it's also helpful to have the context of how new some of these policies are, because that was a context that I was lacking. I definitely, as we were looking at these examples that, or not examples, specific situations that Lieutenant Turner added. One, thank you for adding it. That was really helpful for me to know of just what the scale was. But for two of those, I found myself looking at these and wondering, well, was that an objectively reasonable deployment? And could there have been a situation in which everyone involved could have gone home safe, or at least be alive today? That's one of the things that I turn to, is how can we push ourselves to make it so that more people live, that more people have that opportunity to pursue their life, their liberty, their happiness. And so that's the thing that's going to continuously drive me. But having that context that the current policy and the current practices are a little bit more recent and may have prevented those situations is definitely very helpful. One thing that does still weigh on me, though, is how deployment, like Lieutenant Toribio points out, deployment and use are not the same thing. But when a weapon is available, it can be used. And when it's not available because we have given more guidance about when it is or isn't appropriate to use it, then that limits the inappropriate uses that could lead to a unnecessary death or even an unnecessary serious injury. And so with that said, I personally will continue to exhort the department and the police commission to really dig in on this of, are there ways, is there really nothing else that we can do to find a way for everyone to live? And I hope that might be the place that we can all come to as an ad hoc of making space for this. And yeah, that's all I got. I thought I had something more pretty to say, but that's it.
And so I think I would like to just really co-sign what you said right now, because I think that was really important to get to the key of it, and to not miss the forest for the trees when we come to this point of, because I worry, no matter what, this is a situation, right, when we got guns out, that bad things have happened. And either, it's either the rifle that the officers bring, or if we bar them from using that, maybe they have their handgun out. Either way, we have things that are going sideways. And that reminds me to take back, back to our use of force policy, and back to our those mission statements, and the idea around the sanctity of life and everything. And I think that is why, and it sounds like really that we're kind of speaking at both ends of the same situation, that we both are trying to get to the same place of, how can the department limit the amount of the possibility that we have to take someone's life, right? Understanding the sanctity of life is our highest priority, but also that we provide our officers with the tools that they need to be successful. I really do, I think that there's a lot of room, like Lieutenant Toribio said, to emphasize that in our training, to really, make sure that there is a constant reminder of going back to that use of force policy, and going back to, no matter what the situation is, whether it is a person who is accused of stealing a candy bar to a person who's accused of multiple homicide, that our goals and our policy stays the same. And it's not policy, it's our culture stays the same around de-escalation, a commitment to that, a commitment to the sanctity of life, and and that should stay in the forefront. So I'm hopeful that is what the department puts forward. I know we can always improve and seek to improve, but I am heartened that I think that we're definitely sort of speaking at the same goal. That being said, I know you did reference a couple things, and I want to stop sharing here and go back. Actually, if we could, well, we have a little bit time, with your indulgence, Commissioner, to the impact report. So you did get a chance. You did talk about that, so I wanted for people who were kind of following along, let's see, to get a chance go about this. So thank you to Lieutenant Toribio. I don't know if I sent this to you, but he did give me some information on these rifles, so I can provide that orally. But it's we have ordered 15 of these sequence precision rifles, and the total amount was, I believe, $102,000. So for a initial cost for these at a unit price of around, I want to say, $6,400 each. And that'll be in the next draft there, but did change this to this table. Similarly, you can see that there. Let's see, the here around the this is estimated or anticipated ongoing costs. So I talked about the initial training, and added these paragraphs around the training for both patrol rifle program and the tactical team. That the candidates are on we call straight time. They're being paid their normal hours, but that if they are patrol officer or some sort of essential function, that there may need to be backfill for their position. Someone like me who is not an essential job, we would just leave the job vacant. We do talk about the number of replacements. Lieutenant Toribio informs me it's less than one per year that they actually fully replace. Let's see, and the funding does come from the Special Operations Division. Did talk about a little bit that people who may, have escaped from totalitarian countries, been the victim of community violence, where perpetrators who use these type of weapons may feel triggered mentally or mentally impacted by the sight of these, and that we do attempt to overcome these challenges. Also did talk a little bit more and had some more conversations with Lieutenant Toribio about the ballistics of these. So beyond talking about the accuracy standards, and I'm glad that we did get pushed on this a little bit, because that was very helpful, right? Yeah, there is the possibility that an errant round misses its target, passes through some obstacles, and then strikes another person. Talked about all these other things, but my understanding is that the ballistic profile of these rounds is actually similar to the duty handgun round. Now that can either be comforting or discomforting, but realistically, thankfully, with the rifles being a little bit more accurate, that is hopefully should be less than if the officers were shooting duty handgun rounds. So I saw Lieutenant Toribio and then Ms. Tu.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback or kind of clarify things in terms of ballistics, in terms of penetration. Yeah, I think that's important. That's important to distinguish, because I mean, ballistically, they do different things based in part mostly on the velocity of the round, right? The rifle round is going much faster. Not to get too much into ballistics, but the permanent cavity it creates can actually be smaller than the cavity created by a larger pistol round, but the temporary cavity it creates, right? Like kind of like the shock wave of when the round hits, and then what it does to the surrounding medium that it strikes, depending on what the medium is much more impactful from the rifle. But in terms of penetration, there's just the way that the science of the ballistics work, there's not much different in terms of concerns of over penetration, like going through somebody and then like hitting somebody else. So I was late here because I was at a shooting scene where a handgun was fired, went through the back trunk, through the back seat, through the front seat, and then hit the driver. And that was just a pistol round, right? So, depending on the medium, a pistol round will push right through it. But it's what happens when you get now to wound ballistics, when it hits flesh and hits a body, that things really start to tighten up in terms of, at least in terms of penetration. So just to kind of wrap it up and conclude, in terms of penetration, not a whole lot different from our rifle and our pistol rounds.
Thank you, Steve. Jennifer?
This is really, really helpful, all of this additional context about this. I had two questions. One is, I see the ballistic profile through common materials. Really helpful to hear Lieutenant Toribio's expansion on that. I'm wondering if you could add like one sentence, like for a layperson, for like, what does it mean that the ballistic profile has a similar, that it's a similar profile? And if you could add what he was saying about the difference when it hits a human body, and how that might be different, and just like a layperson's explanation for what the ballistic profile meant. I was also interested in the 80% accuracy. I just don't know what that means for it to mean 80%. Like, does that mean like 80% of the time you hit the target, or like there's some kind of like how big or small the target has to be? Yeah,
the 80%, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, because I know it's been a while since I've shot the rifle, but the 80% is hitting the point within the target that we use. So we use it does not look, it's a silhouette of a human, but does not use human features or have face or anything like that to simulate that.
So that target does, and it has designated areas, and there are different areas that are the point of aim for different courses of fire. So they're basically different scoring zones for the purposes of calculating a score. And then the total score has to pass 80%.
Great, thank you. let's see. So just yeah, only a few minutes left, but did add. Well, let's see. Yeah, a little bit about more about what we do during the training. That it is more than just learning, as Lieutenant Toribio even expanded upon today. It includes about some no-shoot scenarios. Steve, maybe we could just check on this because this was my information from the last time that it was 5 days. It sounds like maybe we have expanded the training a little bit beyond what I was aware of. We'll talk a little bit about that here. And then, yes, that we did add these, the most recent data available, which is the 2022 deployments, because that's it was in a readily available spreadsheet. So 129 deployments across all these areas. And then that there have been no no discharges of the rifles in the year 2022. And then since 2017, which is the earliest year that I am aware of, statistics that I have readily available, there have been 4.
I really appreciate the updates you've made to this. I think a lot of it's very effective, and I agree with Jennifer. One of the things I would like to see is just a sort of acknowledgement of that the difference between the sort of permanent wound cavity, temporary wound cavity, and between the two sort of the sidearm and rifle round. I just so that there's an acknowledgement that is a reality.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. Because I was trying to remember where I did talk about that. Yes, I did. So I remember adding, I think I missed this talking about this, but yes, did talk about the rifle rounds do move at a much higher velocity when striking the human body may cause both temporary and permanent wound cavities that are larger than those caused by the handgun. And do strict talk about that. So yeah, there definitely is an acknowledgement of that, but at the same time, really trying to emphasize around our culture of just anytime we're using anything involving lethal force, that is a huge deal.
Certainly. Yeah. Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks. I know we're near time. I really like how you give that context about the personnel time on training and split that between the initial and the ongoing. I'm still having a hard time trying to get a sense for the scale of it. I'm wondering if you can either do a table or some kind of a just a rough breakdown of what that what the rough recurring personnel time is in terms of trainers, trainees, recurring certifications, and what that translates to in terms of officer hours per any unit.
Yeah, we can just maybe tighten this up on the for both of these, because yeah, for a tactical team operator, it's going to be 2, I think, 8-hour days per quarter. Is it 10 hours? Those guys will let me know one way or the other. And then for the patrol rifle officer, it's going to be the tactical team it's 2 days of training per month, and then for the patrol rifle officers, it's going to be 1 training day per quarter. And that's going to depend on how many people. So not every tactical operator, for instance, is, goes to every training day. Sometimes they're sick or they take vacation during that time or whatever. So, but yeah, we can add a little bit more in there to kind of make it clear. Okay, well, yeah, Commissioner Jordan, I think that's probably a good place to stop, since we've gotten through the impact report and the policy, had a good discussion on that. And yeah, so I'll turn it back to you.
All right, so we still have the other SIMs and armor vehicle to sort of review from the meeting last week. What is on what is sort of slated for Wednesday?
So Jesse's schedule was flashbangs, robots because of the mounted weapons,
Yes.
including impact report for the robots. And that is it for Wednesday.
So I guess we'll plan on getting to those, and then the things that we were unable to move forward. Do we also want to how are we feeling about the progress we made around my brain is fried. Too many meetings, you guys. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe I could jump in.
Yeah, please.
Friday Police Commission, do we know what we need to make sure goes into the agenda packet?
Yes, so there are 4 policies, I think Commissioner Shea emailed earlier, and I was in contact with the police commission's chief of staff. So yes, we'll get those, and I'm gonna send whatever as well to everyone here, so you're aware. I can't find that email, but
I've got
that's
it.
what you gotta do.
Sorry, I just saw it.
Oh,
It looks like for Friday, he was suggesting revisit last Thursday's policies and also introduce with their impact report, flashbangs, crowd control, robots, and chemical munitions.
Yeah, so yeah, we have the opportunity. You'll have Lieutenant Thompson and Lieutenant DQ on tomorrow, or sorry, Wednesday. I will be out, but yeah, to have the opportunity to talk about those, the impact report for helmets, any of the robot stuff, and then to move on towards Friday.
All right, that sounds good. I just really feel like we need to prioritize things that we need to get things. In some ways, I feel like prioritizing whatever low hanging fruit we have, so we can at least get something approved that we have consensus on, and not burn any more commission meetings with things that are still sort of under development or still have a lot of controversy attached to them. So do we feel like those are agenda items for the commission meeting that we are close on, or are we likely to sort of saw what we had previously? Go ahead, Jennifer. I know we're over time also.
Yeah, sorry about that. I might suggest that whether or not we feel that we are ready, we should go ahead and present on Friday. My reason for, and I know no one really loves that. My reason for that is I'm looking at the Thursday, September 22nd deadline that we have, and thinking about how last Thursday, we had to get some heroic efforts to get things into the agenda packet, but the commission didn't feel ready to act on that. And so my advocacy would be for getting information to the commission sooner, and give them that context of when there is multiple perspectives, and get them a little bit more involved in making some of those decisions.
Sure. Yes. Lieutenant Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, in regards to flashbangs, I'm still working on the policy. The impact report has not been written yet, so I'll see if we can start stepping that up. It will not be ready by Friday. On 3G, I think we can make sure that goes, and then I will work tomorrow. I'm just cleaning up the impact report for helmets, and then I'll try to be sending it out to the group tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah.
Real quick, just for drones are good to go. So unmanned aerial system, I think we can agree that everything's good. I think the robots are good. I think the biggest holdup is going to be maybe the attachments with the OC canister. and the utilization of the tire puncture and the window puncture are the biggest things. Other than that, I don't, and maybe the pan disruptor, which is the 12 gauge blank shotgun round to disable a suspicious package or bypass lock. I think those are the biggest issues with the robot. And then the LRAD 2 is going to be the decibel rating and the continuous versus non-continuous, Jennifer. I think that's the biggest issue we have right now. Other than that, so maybe we can, again, drones are good to go, but if we can clear up maybe the LRAD by Wednesday, hopefully, and I'll do some more digging. I think the robots might have a little bit more work with the email that you sent me, but I think that's, other than that, I think we're good to go.
I'm sorry, can you remind me if the LRAD impact report is done?
It is, but I'm still trying to clarify something with our hostage negotiators on the 100X and the 450X.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if you had sent it and I just completely. Yeah, okay, I did completely blank. Got it. All right, I'm just going to say this so that way I can make sure I'm on the same page. For Wednesday, we'll do the flashbangs, but no impact report. We'll do robots with the impact report, LRAD with the impact report, and then look at the impact report for SIMs and armored vehicles and also helmets.
But let's make sure we get in helmets there. So, because I think that's the only thing that's holding up 3G, and we want train bolts and 3G to go. So let's make that one a priority, or I will.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully we can, that's a lot. That is a lot to cover in 2 hours. Don't know how we're going to do that. And we may need to think about prioritizing things within that 2 hours, the things that we're most likely to be able to get into a agenda packet for the commission to review and approve. But we'll see where we are on Wednesday. Thank you guys for staying a few minutes late, and see you on Wednesday. Oh, sorry, Jennifer, did you have another thing?
Yeah, David, I'm wondering if you can give us advice for the flashbangs. If we're not doing the impact report, should that go to the commission on Friday?
Honestly, I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah, it feels like no, but I am, okay.
If it doesn't go, then we could cut it from Wednesday and move it to Monday, if that works for Lieutenant Thomason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. There's nothing else.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll see you in a couple days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.